Welcome to the Turnpike Sports Spotlight. Dave Weishottle with you here. Working in the gambling industry, I've been to a lot of gaming conferences, but there's one coming up that I think is really special. Not only does it have the top experts in the gambling field, but it's being held at one of the most beautiful areas in this country. It's called the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga, and it's being held on August 14th through the 16th. And we're going to find out all about it because on the line we have the conference owner and director, Patrick Brown. Pat, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Oh, great to have you back. I got to tell you, the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga is certainly an important conference, not only for the horse racing, but for the gambling industry as a whole. Tell us something about the conference. Tell us about the history of the conference. When was the conference first held? And really, what was the inspiration for its creation?
Well, this conference in some form has been going on for 24 years now.
Whoa.
It originally started as a symposium put on by the Albany Law School, really for lawyers and legislative staff. It was a one-day horse racing conference, and that was, as I say, about 24 years ago. The law school ran the conference and expanded it when casino gaming came to New York back in the 2012, 2013. The law school expanded the conference to 2 days, one for horse racing, one for other forms of gaming. And then 3 years ago, the law school decided that they really didn't want to run the conference anymore, and I had been involved with it, helping the law school put it on for all these decades. So I stepped forward and said, "Well, if the law school doesn't want to do it, I'll try my hand at it and I'll do it." So for the last 3 years, I've been running the conference with the professional assistants of the Spectrum Gaming Group, who are just fantastic. They know how to put these conferences together and put them on. So yeah, we're in my third year now, and the conference is pretty much the same as it has been the last couple of years. We have a full day on Tuesday, August 15th, and then we have 4 panels on the morning of August 16th, and then I try to get as many of the conference attendees as possible to spend the afternoon of the 16th at the Saratoga Racecourse and try to bring everybody to the races.
Well, you have to. It's a beautiful course. It's right there, and it's it's such a great area for horse racing. And you mentioned the partners when it comes to this conference. I know you have a very long list of impressive sponsors, and you mentioned Spectrum Gaming, who I know a lot of them listen to this show, so they're listening probably right now. Hello, Spectrum Gaming. Tell us about some of the sponsors that are involved in the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga, because they're some of the leading companies when you're talking about horse racing and gaming in this country.
Oh, yeah. So we have several sort of bricks and mortar casino sponsors: Las Vegas Sands, Genting, and then we have some sports book platforms and some online gaming, MGM's online platform, and bet makers, and the Stronach Group have always been very strong supporters of the conference. We have several law firms who are in the gaming space. My former firm, Brown and Weinraub, has been a long-time sponsor of the conference, and I want to thank my former partner, David Weinraub, for hanging in there with me. So we really run the spectrum, no pun,
there you go.
the gaming industry landscape with our sponsors. And without them, the conference wouldn't happen because the cost would be so prohibitive that folks wouldn't be able to pay it. So
what separates your conference from a lot of conferences is you have an incredibly impressive list of speakers at the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga. Tell me about who are speaking and who are the presenters at the event.
Well, we have over 50 speakers and presenters, but I'll focus a little bit on the first panel. And that's the downstate casino competition panel. This is, an incredibly important issue in New York State, where after years and years, the state is finally going to cite up to 3 casinos in the New York City area, New York City and its suburbs. And so I have a panel that we've put together there that's just so impressive, I think. We have Gary Pretlow, who is the chair of the Racing and Gaming Committee in the New York State Assembly, and along with Joe Adabo, his Senate counterpart, they are really the architects of the law that authorized the casinos to go to New York City. So Gary will be talking about sort of what policy choices he made and the legislature made when they put this law together. And it's such a complicated subject. Yeah. I decided to try to put a person that could talk about different aspects of the bidding process. So we have a Wall Street guy, Jacques Cornette, is going to talk about the money. Like, what does it mean if we have 3 casinos in New York City? What kind of impact will that have on the revenue of the surrounding states and nationally and even internationally? New York City's been described as the last great untapped casino market in the world. Yeah. And so that's it's going to have a real impact on surrounding bricks and mortar casinos.
I am so glad you're starting the conference off with that very important subject, especially for people in the East Coast. I mean, I remember last year when I talked to you, it seemed like that prospect was some time away, but I'm sitting here talking to you now, and a lot of people are talking about, a casino in Citi Field or in Times Square. How close do you think are we to walking into a casino into New York City?
Well, it's still a ways off because the state has set up a very complicated and time-consuming, frankly, process to pick the winners here, and we're just beginning that process. Back a couple months ago, 3 months ago now, maybe, the state put out a request they put out an RFP, and then they said, if you've got questions about the RFP, send them in and we'll answer them. Well, over 600 questions came in from dozens of interested parties, and the state's been in the process of trying to put answers to those 600 questions, and they haven't released those answers yet. So this process is going to take a little bit. Once it gets going, I think that you're gonna see some decisions made by the end of this year, and then probably into first quarter of next year, you may get the winners announced, and then of course the build out of one of these facilities is huge. I mean, the state's requiring a $500 million investment on the build. I mean, just think of that. That even for New York City, that is a major project. So, it'll be 18 months for the build out. If we're talking about a casino that's coming up from scratch. Now there are some proposals where the folks are already kind of in the ground. You have Genting in Queens at Aqueduct, and you have MGM up in Yonkers. Those guys are considered to be sort of front runners in this because they're already established. But it's going to take them a while as well to rebuild and restructure their facilities if they do win. So,
Now, well, I'm sitting here in New Jersey, so of course I read some of the editorial pages in the New York City newspapers, and there's been a little opposition to the idea of operating casinos in the New York City area. What do you think are some of the hurdles that still have to be overcome to get casinos in the New York City area?
Well, one of the very significant pieces to the law that authorizes up to 3 casinos is the extent of the local input in the siting decision. It is a far greater input by local folks than the state did when they did the upstate casinos back about 10 years ago. And from what I've seen in other states and even other parts of the country. So there is this panel that's set up, made up of representatives of local elected officials that the bidders have to go through and get at least 4 of 6 votes to move forward before the state will even look at their proposal. So the locals have a considerable amount of input and control here about where these casinos are going to be sited. So every bidder, in order to be successful, these, and I'm talking about titans here, titans in the gaming world and titans in the real estate world, well, they have to get down to the local level and convince folks in local community boards and activist organizations that what they are bringing to the neighborhood is going to be a positive and not a negative. And that, that's a daunting task. There are folks that just don't want to hear about casinos in their neighborhood, period. And, and then there are people who are more on the fence and want to hear the pros and cons. And then, of course, there is a significant population that says, bring them on, we can't wait. So it's quite a chess game for these bidders.
What are some of the other topics and speakers that we can hear at the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga?
Well, we have real big issues in both the racing world and the bricks and mortar casino world. One of the topics that I'm really looking forward to is the panel on computer-assisted wagering. That panel is going to explore these betting consortiums that use algorithms to place, major wagers on horse racing platforms across the country, across the world, and those consortiums are becoming larger and larger slice of the horse racing wagering pie, and it's very disruptive to the average bettor like me. It's very hard to explain to somebody who isn't familiar with parimutuel wagering that the odds that you bet a horse on aren't the odds that get paid, even if your horse wins. And it's a real competitive disadvantage, frankly, for pari-mutuel wagering over other types of sports wagering. Mm-hmm. You know, when I bet the Giants and get 7 points, even if the line drops to 6 or 5.5, I still get my 7 points. Mm-hmm. That's not the case in horse racing. No. And if there is something that's moving that pari-mutuel odds dramatically right at the end of the betting cycle, as these algorithms can do, or I should say not the algorithms, the large wagers based on the algorithms. Sure. Well, that's disruptive to folks, and they kind of stay in the shadows. They don't bring attention to themselves, these consortiums, and we want to try to get people talking about this issue because, as I say, it is a larger and larger share of the pari-mutuel pie. Yeah. And, so that's going to be an interesting one.
Let me ask you about that. I couldn't wait to jump in and ask you about that because a couple weeks ago in New Jersey, a little horse racing history happened. We saw the launch of a horse racing betting app called Monmouth Bets, which had fixed odds betting on some of the races, and that's really the first time fixed odds betting was using a horse racing app. Do you think this country has a long way to go before fixed odds betting is commonplace in horse racing? And do you think, since this app went live, will that open up the idea, at least, of using fixed odds in horse racing across the country?
Well, personally, I don't think fixed odds will ever supplant pari-mutuel wagering. Okay. But I do think there is a place for it, and alongside of pari-mutuel wagering, but that's very complicated to run both a pari-mutuel system and a fixed odds system, kind of side by side. And I give the folks at Monmouth a lot of credit for figuring it out, at least to the extent they have so far. I mean, there is inertia in the horse racing industry. I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. They are slow to change. Yes. And, that's an issue for fixed odds. Mm-hmm. There are also legal, sometimes constitutional impediments to bringing fixed odds into various states. I mean, New York, for example, the Constitution says there shall be no gambling except, and then there's a long and getting longer list of exceptions. One of the exceptions is pari-mutuel wagering on horse racing. Oh, okay. So in our Constitution in New York, there is an impediment to fixed odds because it is not pari-mutuel. Now, there's clever lawyers who have, argued that there's ways around that and that sort of thing, and there may well be. But I'm just using that as an example of why it may take a lot longer for fixed odds to get itself implanted into the country's wagering culture. Mm-hmm. I will say this, to attract new bettors, younger bettors, people who are used to betting on sports, fixed odds is certainly a place where they would be more comfortable than a pari-mutuel bet.
Mm-hmm. Back to some of the panels you have. I love your conference because you have panels that aren't around in any other conferences, and they really make me think working in this industry. I mean, one of the panels I definitely want to check out is a panel called historical horse racing machines, the tail wagging the horse. Like I said, I as someone who works in the gaming industry, I have been hearing about these machines nonstop for, it seems like, forever. And I've yet to play one. I know they're important to the gaming industry. I just don't know how important they are to the gaming industry. What impact do you think these machines have for the industry, and how important are they for the horse racing industry?
Well, I mean, some reports say that this year the handle on HHR, historical horse racing, has surpassed handle on live racing.
Wow, really?
Nationwide. So that, now I don't know that is accurate, but if it hasn't surpassed, it is certainly getting closer and closer to surpassing the handle on live racing. So what does that mean? Well, it means that these machines have a larger and larger impact on the horse racing industry. The purses in Kentucky are directly related to the handle on historic horse racing machines. I mean, there's just no argument about that. And, you know, the logic has always been higher purses, better racing. So those machines are, by that logic, good for Kentucky horse racing. Now, a lot of people would argue that that's not the case. I mean, this is a very contentious, controversial issue within the horse racing industry. It kind of reminds me, I'm old enough to know, to remember the fights we had in the late 80s and the early 90s when the original slot machines and VLT arguments were being made about putting them in racetracks. And, you know, the folks talked about this will be the death of racing. It'll supplant the handle and it'll be terrible. And then the other side was arguing, no, we need the revenue stream to enhance our purses to make our racing better. And, you know, now we're 30 years on here, even longer, and, you know, I'd say that the revenue from machines at racetracks have definitely been a major source of revenue for higher purses across the country. No doubt about it. So historic racing, you know, kind of fits into that mold. You know, whether these machines are parimutuel is a fascinating legal question. And we're going to have folks on this panel who can talk about that. And because, again, in some states, only parimutuel wagering is allowed.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't qualify as parimutuel, historic horse racing is not going to be allowed unless it is just considered another slot machine, you know, with a picture of horses running, which, you know, some people think that's what historic horse racing is. I don't happen to agree with that. I think there is something different about these machines than a traditional slot machine. Frankly, one of the arguments being made is this is a gateway for younger, you know, newer bettors to get interested in handicapping and betting on racing. The machine becomes the gateway into betting on live racing. I don't vouch for the veracity of that statement, but certainly an argument that's been made.
Do you think, you know, with the historic horse racing machines, with the fixed odds and the partnerships that racing industries and sports betting operators, in your opinion, is that increasing the audience for horse racing and harness racing?
I think it's increasing the opportunity to capture an audience. Whether the industry is nimble enough to seize on that opportunity is still a very open question. Mm-hmm. But more eyeballs are looking at horse racing. More, people have more avenues into the sport. The question is, can the folks who run the racetracks and run the betting apps and run the totes, are they clever enough and nimble enough to lure those folks into what for 40 years, I believe is one of the most fascinating pastimes, and that's handicapping horses.
Yeah. I mentioned harness racing because you have another panel which really sparked my interest because I saw it on the agenda, and before I saw it on the agenda, I really didn't think too much about it. And the panel is called Harness Racing, an Industry in Decline or in Transformation. I like I said, I didn't think too much about it because in New Jersey, I live very close to a farm. And when I drive by, I always see people harness racing and working out the horses. So it's something... it's every day I see it, so I thought, the industry must be great because I see it every day. I mean, in your opinion, what kind of changes is harness racing going through, and what do you think the future holds for the harness racing industry? Because it's something fascinating, and I don't hear too much about. That's what's so great about your conference.
Well, first point I'll make is that in the 1950s, harness racing was king.
Yeah.
Not only king as between harness and thoroughbred, but it was king as a sporting event, eclipsing the NFL and Major League Baseball, and harness racing and boxing were the two sports that were the most popular. So we have clearly gone through a cycle where that's just not the case anymore. But I would argue that with the rise of sports betting and with the rise of sports betting apps and the rise of the voracious appetite for content that television streaming channels are looking for, that harness racing may well benefit not as the major player it once was. I don't think that's going to come back, but as a niche market that will be very healthy. I look at the numbers for people who bet on table tennis, okay?
Yes.
And they're very large.
It's shockingly large. I mean, Colorado loves it.
Oh, yeah, Colorado's like eclipses horse racing, which is kind of
amazing.
But I think, if there is a market for the content of table tennis and a betting market for table tennis, there clearly is a market for harness racing and betting on harness racing. Again, it's an opportunity. It requires the industry to be nimble and creative and innovative to seize on the opportunity. And, we'll have to kind of wait and see if they can. Harness racing in New Jersey and New York is still very, very big part of the horse racing picture.
Yeah.
You have Yonkers, you have Meadowlands. These are the, major tracks. But we have other harness racing tracks in New York as well. There's one right down the street from the thoroughbred track in Saratoga. So I felt that this conference and most other conferences that I attend don't really pay much attention to harness. So I wanted to have a panel dedicated specifically to issues that confront the harness industry that may be different than the issues confronting thoroughbred. So that's what I hope to accomplish there.
No, it's a great addition. And I only mentioned a couple of the panels. What are some of the other panels that you want to tell people about that they can experience at the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga?
Well, one of the really big issues nationally in the gaming industry is the transformative regulation being proposed and considered in Washington on online gaming for Indian nations and Indian tribes. And this reg would allow tribes to participate in the online gaming arena as part of their Class 3 compact. And that's a major change, particularly because the reg would allow the tribes to have players physically located off Indian lands and making wagers into the tribe's computer, basically, which would be located on the Indian lands. This is a big deal, and it will have, if approved, it will have tremendous impact, I believe, across the Indian gaming world and the non-Indian commercial gaming world. And we're going to have a panel that talks about that issue and also talks about some of the creative ways that states have engaged with their with the Indian tribes located within the states to, some creative compacting and agreements. Florida, Connecticut, Michigan, other states. So that should be very interesting. Yeah. And that, if you're not in that world, you really don't, that doesn't make it to the mainstream press very often. So that's a panel that I think folks may get a lot out of just because they're not hearing it elsewhere. Another, kind of a perennial, but one that, is still cutting edge, it seems, is the iGaming panel. We have Senator Joe Adabo, who is sponsoring a bill in New York to bring iGaming to New York. And we have some industry players, Howard Glazer and others, on that panel. And, one of the things that has happened really industry-wide or nationwide, I should say, is that sports betting, online sports betting kind of took off like wildfire, and so many states passed laws to allow it. And my thought and the thought of many was that, online gaming will follow on, closely thereafter. Yeah. And that really hasn't happened. I think there's only 6 states that have authorized online gaming, and maybe 30 states have some form of online sports betting.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about, what's the problem here? Why are states so reluctant to do online gaming when they've already sort of crossed the threshold with the online sports betting?
Sure. I got to tell you, that's the question I've been asking for about a year now on this show, and I still haven't gotten a great answer. I'm glad you're having a panel on it because it's such a huge issue for states. And I got to bring up one thing about the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga. We can't talk about the conference without talking about the historic race course that is right there. I mean, tell us something about this incredible track, and tell us about if the conference is doing anything or holding any events at that location during the conference.
Well, on Monday, August 14th, we're going to have a welcome party at the Adelphi Hotel, which is an incredible venue in downtown Saratoga. The Adelphi has been restored, meticulously restored to its old glory, and it is an incredible place. This is the place where you see pictures of Teddy Roosevelt and Mark Twain in rocking chairs on the porch, kind of taking in the scene of Broadway, of Saratoga in their day, right?
Yeah.
This is just such a place of history and elegance. I mean, it is really an incredible venue. So we're gonna have some fun there. We're gonna start the conference there on Monday night, and we're gonna end the conference at the Saratoga Race Course on Wednesday afternoon. In the middle, we're going to have very serious people talking about very serious topics, but we're going to have some fun as well. This year, we're doing something a little different at Saratoga. I have secured a venue at the race course called the Spa Veranda.
Oh, okay.
And it is it's a really neat venue that holds 50 people. It's up at the top of the stretch, and it has an inside room and then an outside area where you can walk down the apron to the rail. And we're gonna offer that to the first 50 conference attendees who want to take us up on it. We have a couple of boxes available. We'll probably have picnic tables in the backyard available. So all of those different types of experiences we're offering to the conference attendees, depending on whether you want to wear shorts and flip-flops and, go to the backyard, or you want to wear a fancy hat and sit in the clubhouse, or, join us at the Spa Veranda up at the top of the stretch. I mean, racing at Saratoga is the absolute best of the sport. It's the best owners, the best trainers, the best horses, the best jockeys. It is the best, and everybody should experience it. I mean, even if you've never gone before, I sound like Chamber of Commerce for Saratoga, but I, living close to the track and going there most of my life, it never gets old for me. It is just a great experience, and the horse racing couldn't be better. So.
Sounds incredible. Pat, we're running out of time, but if someone wants to get involved and attend the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga, what's the website they go to, and how do they sign up to attend the event? So
the website is racingandgamingsaratoga.com. Go there. There are places to click to register for the conference. There's places we have a block of hotels at the Hilton where the conference is being held. So, a place to get a room at a little bit of a cut rate. Getting a hotel room in Saratoga in August is not easy.
Yeah.
So, definitely, click on the hotel room. There's a click there for the entire agenda so you can see who's speaking and what the panels are. And there's also a place to click if you wanted to become a sponsor. So the whole gamut is right there at that website.
Pat Brown, thanks so much for coming on and telling us all about the Racing and Gaming Conference at Saratoga, which is being held on August 14th through the 16th, and you can check that out at racingandgamingsaratoga.com. Sounds like it's going to be an incredible event, so anyone who's interested in horse racing, sports betting, and in the gaming industry in general should check it out. Pat, thanks so much for coming on and telling us about it.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And that'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on the Turnpike.